Chapter 1, The Throne of Burning Petals. Feel the sweet, spicy scent of Xōchipilli, the cacao flower, mingled with the smoke of sacred tobacco burning on a black ceramic plate. Hear the low hum of a hummingbird hovering over a Nahuatl flower, as a poet's song dissolves into silence. See the closed eyes of a young man sitting on the beaten earth floor, his hands open to the sky, tattooed with designs of mushrooms, peyote, and night butterflies. This is the moment when reality dissolves, and Xōchipilli appears. In the Nahuatl worldview, transmitted orally for centuries and recorded in codices like the Florentine, he is not a distant god, but the living embodiment of creative ecstasy, the point where beauty, pain, vision, and transience merge into a single breath. His name, Xōchipilli, means Prince of Flowers, but these flowers are symbols of sacred ephemerality. They are born, bloom with splendor, and wither, revealing, precisely in their withering, the deepest truth. Son of Tenochtitlán, the young morning sun, and Xōchipilli, goddess of art and desire, he carries the essential duality of the Nahuatl world, the daily rebirth of the sun and the fragility of earthly beauty. Xōchipilli does not rule kingdoms, command armies, nor demand blood sacrifices. But without him, no poem is born, no healing is complete, no love is true, because, for the Nahuatl, art is prayer, trance is listening, and love is offering. That is why the ancients sought its favor with Tenochtitlán, the meat mushrooms of the gods, peyote, and psilocybin, ritual tobacco not to escape the world, but to see it in its essence, vibrant, interconnected, sacred. But there is a price for this vision. Whoever enters the garden of Xōchipilli never returns unscathed, for to see beauty in its fullness is also to perceive the pain that makes it precious. Now, a young poet named Tenochtitlán prepares for his first ritual of inspiration. Sitting by a lake at dusk, with a chalice of dried mushrooms in his hand, he whispers, "Xōchipilli, show me the song that has not yet been sung." The wind answers with wild jasmine, the flowers open like mouths about to speak, and the first stars light up in the sky, not as points of light, but as eyes. Chapter 2, The Song Born from Silence. Feel the bittersweet taste of the sacred mushroom dissolving on Tenochtitlán's tongue. Hear the growing buzzing in your ears, not of insects, but of time itself slowing down. See the leaves of the trees transform into pages of a book that only the heart can read. The ordinary world disappears, the lake becomes a mirror of the yet-to-be-born night sky, the stones breathe, the flowers whisper in an ancient tongue. It is in this space between realities that Xōchipilli appears, not with a throne or scepter, but dancing barefoot on immortal petals, his body shimmering with the pigments of 1,000 flowers, each intoning a note of a song predating language. His eyes are closed, but he sees everything. His hands do not ask, they offer. "Why did you call me?" he asks, and the voice is born within the young man's chest. Tenochtitlán replies that he wishes to sing something capable of reminding people that they are children of the earth and the stars. "So you don't want fame. You want truth," Xōchipilli smiles. "And truth is beautiful because it is dangerous." The god extends his hand, and in his palm rests an invisible melody, made of dew, the lament of an owl, and the first sigh of dawn. Tenochtitlán drinks it without touching anything, and verses in pulses of light spring forth in his mind. But when he tries to translate them into human words, he fails. Ordinary languages break before the divine. Desperate, he weeps. Xōchipilli then reveals the essence of true art. It doesn't translate, it transmits. It doesn't explain, it invokes. The song is already in his chest, it doesn't need to be perfect, only felt with truth. When the trance dissolves and the world resumes its apparent form, Tenochtitlán no longer sees reality as something fixed, but as a poem in motion, where every gesture, silence, and tear can be a verse. At dawn, he returns to the village with a single verse engraved on his soul: "I am a flower that sings before it is born, and silence that dances after it dies." As he recites it, everything falls silent, elders, children, even the animals seem to listen. The verse is not his, it belongs to Xōchipilli, who now speaks through him. But not everyone celebrates the seers. That night, a devout priest of Xōchipilli, god of war and the warrior sun, observes the young man with suspicion. "Ecstasy without sacrifice is weakness. Beauty without blood is illusion," he murmurs. For him, Xōchipilli diverts souls from their duty. And he decides, it is time to silence the flowers. Chapter 3, The Forbidden Garden. Smell the damp ashes, not from a ritual bonfire, but from flowers burned in secret. Hear the crackling of dried petals being crushed under leather boots, while a decree echoes through the city squares: no one shall sing idle songs. No one shall seek visions without shedding blood. See Tenochtitlán hide his deerskin drum under the clay floor of his hut, afraid of being branded a traitor to Tenochtitlán, the warrior order. The conflict is not new. In the Nahuatl worldview, the world is sustained by a balance of forces, the sun that demands sacrifice and the flower that blooms without asking permission. Xōchipilli, the warrior hummingbird, demands blood to keep the sun moving. Xōchipilli, the prince of flowers, demands sensitivity to keep the soul alive. Both are necessary, but in times of war and imperial expansion, beauty is seen as a dangerous luxury, ecstasy as weakness, and love without practical use as betrayal. The high priest Quatli, invoking the need to protect the sun, forbids rituals with visionary plants, burns the gardens of Tenochtitlán, and declares that seeking visions without blood is paving the way for illusion. Tlachtl is summoned to the temple not as a poet, but as a suspect. Faced with the accusations, he replies firmly, "I offered my heart." But for Quatli, this is not enough, the sun needs life. That night, Tlachtl flees, not out of fear, but out of loyalty to what he saw. He takes with him only a necklace of Cacahuaxaquitl seeds and a jar of wild honey, a simple but pure offering, and heads for the mountains, towards the invisible garden of Xōchipilli, accessible only to those who sing with a broken, yet still open, heart. High on the mountain, under the full moon of Xōchipilli, Tlachtl finds not an ordinary garden, but a circle of silent shamans, men and women who, like him, refuse to weaponize poetry. In the center, the Peyote, flower of infinity, blooms. And among them, in a lotus position, is Xōchipilli. "You came," says the god. "I had no choice," replies the young man. "There is always a choice," corrects Xōchipilli, opening his eyes, not with brilliance, but with vegetal fire, the flame that illuminates without destroying. "Now you are not only a poet. You are a guardian." But danger approaches. Quatli has sent warriors to uproot the sacred garden. They do not come to dialogue, they come to silence, to extirpate. And Xōchipilli, who was never only beauty, reveals his deepest face, that of resistance, of art against dogma, of love against utility, of vision against fear. Chapter 4, The Dance That Cannot Be Imprisoned. Feel the cold of the stone beneath Tlachtl's bare feet as he kneels in the circle of shamans. Hear the first cry of a harpy eagle in the sky, not of hunting, but of warning. See the shadows of warriors descending the slope, their obsidian spears gleaming under the moon of Xōchipilli. They come in the name of order, but they bring the death of sight. Xōchipilli, however, neither flees nor fights. Instead, he begins to dance. His bare feet cause flowers of the divine sun to sprout from the earth, his arms draw ancestral sounds in the air, the humming of the hummingbird, the whisper of the feathered serpent, the song of the rain frog. One by one, the shamans enter a trance and join the dance, and Tlachtl, with his heart pounding in sacred rhythm, chants the verse he received, "I am a flower that sings before it is born, and silence that dances after it dies." For the warriors, it is merely a murmur, for the earth, it is enchantment. The Yatli vines emerge from the ground, enveloping the path and exhaling fragrant smoke. A warrior, inhaling, sees the face of his young mother singing under a tree, and falls to his knees, not from weakness, but from the memory. Even Quatli, the high priest, feels his authority waver before that force that does not kill, but reveals. "Illusion," he cries, trying to resist. But his own men hesitate, they see themselves as children again, loving without conquering, crying without shame. Xōchipilli then ceases the dance. In the silence that follows, he speaks in a soft but firm voice, "You come in the name of the sun, but you have forgotten that the sun also loves flowers. Without beauty, sacrifice becomes a machine. Without poetry, war becomes madness." Quatli advances with his staff of authority, asserting that the world is sustained by blood, not flowers. Xōchipilli replies, "And blood only has meaning if there is something beautiful to protect." He offers him a closed Cacahuaxaquitl flower, asking him to plant it before the altar of Xōchipilli as a reminder of what is worth loving. For a moment, Quatli hesitates, he sees the face of his dead brother, with petals hidden beneath his armor. But pride wins, he crushes the flower with his sandal. In that same instant, the wind changes, the flowers wither, and the shamans disappear into the mist. Xōchipilli does not resist, he knows that truth does not impose itself, it can only be awaited. But it leaves behind, in the earth where the flower was crushed, a new plant, petals red as blood, a center golden as the sun. Tlachtl gathers it. He knows that this is not the end, but the seed of another song, one that will soon be sung not in the hidden mountains, but within the very temples of war. Chapter 5, The Flower on the Altar of War. Feel the metallic scent of fresh blood mingled with the copal incense burning on the altars of Tenochtitlán. Hear the rhythmic sound of war drums, punctuated by the muffled cries of a young prisoner being led to the Tlachtl, the sacrificial stone. See, on the red stone floor of Xōchipilli's temple, a single flower blooming among the cracks, red petals, golden center, as if the sun had wept a vegetal tear. No one notices it, except Quatli. Since crushing the flower offered by Xōchipilli, the high priest has not slept. His dreams are silent gardens and children's voices that wake him with a wet face. He tries to stifle it all with more rituals and speeches about duty, but the flower has returned, and now grows in the very heart of the Temple of War. Tlachtl, disguised as a cleaner of sacred vessels, observes everything. It was he who planted the seed, not out of provocation, but out of faith. On the night of the dark moon, he climbed the forbidden steps and left it where the blood of the last sacrifice had flowed, remembering that, even in violence, the Nahuatl worldview recognizes duality. The sun needs blood to be born, but also beauty to be worth being born. Even the Quetzalcoatl warriors celebrate this sacred tension. My arrows are petals of fire. My shield, the chalice of the night. For the Nahuatl, war was never only destruction, it was also offering, and every offering demands something beautiful. But Quatli forgot this. On the eve of the great Panquetzalisli festival, he orders the flower to be uprooted, calling it contamination. The servants hesitate, their hands tremble, the root seems to throb, one of them swears he hears a song. Furious, Quatli takes an obsidian dagger and tries to cut it himself. The instant the blade touches the stem, a spiritual pain pierces him. In a flash of vision, he sees his dead brother holding the same flower, his young mother planting it at his birth, and Xōchipilli between them, whispering, "You do not hate the flower. You fear what it reminds you of, that you too were loved before you were useful." The priest falls to his knees. The dagger falls. The flower remains. That night, Quatli does not return to the temple. He goes to the edge of the lake, where the reeds whisper secrets, and weeps, for the first time in decades. Meanwhile, Tlachtl prepares for his boldest act, to chant a Xōchipilli Quetzalcoatl, a flowery song, during the sacrificial ceremony. Not to interrupt the rite, but to remind the warriors why they fight. Because Xōchipilli does not oppose sacrifice, he opposes forgetting. And when the sun rises on Panquetzalisli's day, the world will hear a voice that sings not to please, but to awaken, a voice that reminds us, even on the altar of war, a flower can bloom. Chapter 6, The Song That Bleeds and Blooms. Feel the warmth of dawn beating against the stones of the Templo Mayor, still damp with the dew and blood of the previous night. Hear the warriors chanting the Quetzalcoatl Quatli, the song of the eagle, with firm voices, but tired eyes. See Tlachtl, dressed in a simple white cotton cloak, ascend the steps not as an invader, but as an offerer, with a small drum under his arm and his lips sealed in silence. Today is Panquetzalisli, the sacred month in which Huitzilopochtli was born from the mountain of Coatepec, armed and ready to guide his people. It is a day of dance, sacrifice, and loyalty to the sun, but also, secretly, a day of flowers. For even the birth of the warrior god was celebrated with petals, even war has its garden. Tlachtl is not permitted to sing, but the ancient law allows any offering made with purity, provided it does not interrupt the ritual. He approaches Quatli, whose eyes still bear the weight of the night's tears, and says, "I bring a song." And, before anyone can stop him, he raises his drum and intones with a presence that cuts through the roar of the war drums. His song is not rebellion, it is remembrance. The flower is my word, the thorn, my silence. I sing because I died and saw that the sun weeps before it is born. The warriors' voices fall silent. Even the prisoner on the sacrificial stone raises his head. Tlachtl does not condemn war, he reveals its purpose. Warrior, before you kill, remember what you loved. Quatli, faced with these words, sees his brother's face again, the flower on the altar, Xōchipilli not as an adversary, but as a mirror. Something breaks within him, not the order of the ritual, but the wall he had built around his own heart. "Let him sing," he commands, his voice hoarse. "Do not interfere," Tlachtl replies. "Complete." And so, as the obsidian knife rises and the prisoner's heart is offered to the sun, the poet whispers, "This blood is not an end. It is a seed. May it sprout into a flower, not into vengeance." The sun breaks over Tenochtitlán. The smoking heart rises to the heavens. And, at the same time, a breeze carries the sweet and spicy scent of Quetzalcoatl, not from hidden gardens, but from the altar itself. Xōchipilli needs no temples, it dwells where the heart opens, even amidst pain. But the balance is fragile. In the shadow of the steps, a new enemy observes, not a priest of the sun, but a Spaniard with cold eyes and an iron cross on his chest. He did not understand the words of the chant, but he felt its power. And he decides, with absolute coldness, these flowers, these visions, these songs must be eradicated. The war now will not be between Nahuatl gods, it will be against the very right to dream. Chapter 7, The Cross That Does Not Bloom. Smell the scent of hot iron and horse sweat, something strange, harsh, that does not belong to the Nahuatl land. Hear the clinking of metal spurs against sacred stone, like demonic nails scratching the womb of the world. See the face of the Spanish friar, Fray Alonso, furrowed in disgust, observing the still smoking altar, the flowers on the ground, the warriors with eyes moist not with fear, but with recognition. He does not understand the Nahuatl, nor the sacrifice, but he feels, with the instinct of a conqueror, that something here resists. Not with spears, but with beauty. And beauty, for those who only know power through force, is the most dangerous of heresies. That night, in his diary, he writes, "Today I witnessed an abominable rite. This poisonous weed must be uprooted, not only from the temples, but from the minds." He does not know who Xōchipilli is. But he has already condemned him. In the following days, the missionaries began their work of erasure. They burned codices that spoke of sacred plants, forbade Tenochtitlán, calling it the flesh of the devil, replaced altars of flowers with wooden crosses, and taught children that vision is illusion, ecstasy, sin. Tlachtl, now hunted by both the ancient priests and the pale-eyed foreigners, took refuge in the caves of Popocatépetl, where shamans guarded seeds, songs, and silences. But Xōchipilli did not disappear, it transformed. It emerged like the wind in the leaves of Yatli, like the dream of a boy drawing flowers on the convent walls, like the scent of jasmine that sprouted even where the ground had been salted. Because, the wise ones say, the flower does not fight against the axe. It waits for the axe to rust, and then grows in the crack of the blade. In a vision, Tlachtl finds Xōchipilli covered not in petals, but in scars, his eyes, once closed in ecstasy, now open and full of pain. "They come to erase my memory," says the god. But memory doesn't dwell in books. It dwells in hearts that still feel. When he asks what to do, he receives the mission: sing in secret, teach without a name. Hide the verses in the rhythms of the corn, in the harvest dances, in the names of the herbs. And if they forget his name? My name is not important. What matters is that someone, somewhere, still weeps with beauty. That night, Tlachtl writes his last song on tree bark, with charcoal ink and cacahuaxaquitl juice, and buries it under a stone, an act of mourning and hope. Because he knows that one day someone will find it, feel the same fire in their chest, and ask about the god of flowers. The answer will not come from a book, it will come from within. But time is running out. The cross moves forward. And Xōchipilli, for the first time, feels the weight of collective oblivion, not as an end, but as hibernation. Because even the most sacred flowers know, to survive, sometimes it is necessary to die in silence, and be reborn under another name. Chapter 8, The Silence That Sings in the Roots. Taste the damp earth and decaying leaves, the scent of things that hide to live. Hear the profound silence of the Popocatépetl caves, where even the bats stop flying when an ancient verse is whispered. See Tlachtl, now old, deliver the bark with his last song to a dark-eyed girl, daughter of a healer who still guards the true names of plants. When the world forgets, he says, plant this where the sun rises. She doesn't ask why, she just nods. Because some truths need no explanation, only witnesses. The years pass. Tenochtitlán falls. The Templo Mayor is buried beneath stone cathedrals. The Xōchipilli are called devil's enchantments. The Tenochtitlán flowers disappear from the fields, or are harvested in secret, as acts of spiritual resistance. Xōchipilli is no longer invoked by name, but his presence persists, disguised in 1,000 forms, in the Virgin of Guadalupe enveloped in petals, in the dances of the conch shell makers who spin like ancient shamans, in the healers who use Yatli and psilocybin under Christian names, and yet they are heard. Because the sacred does not die, it transforms. He now lives in the embroidery of the molas, in the lullabies that hold forbidden verses, in the gazes of lovers who know, without words, that their encounter is grace, not just desire. But there is a price. Without rituals, without guides, many seek the plants not for vision, but for escape. Ecstasy becomes addiction, poetry, decoration, love, merchandise. And Xōchipilli suffers, not as an abandoned god, but as a plundered garden. On a moonless night, he visits Tlachtl for the last time. The world you knew is gone, he says softly, but what is to come can still flourish, if someone remembers that beauty is duty, not luxury, that seeing is courage, not weakness, that loving is revolution. Tlachtl, gazing at the horizon divided by crosses and temples, asks, and if no one remembers? Xōchipilli smiles, a smile that doesn't touch his lips, but the air between the trees, someone will always remember. As long as there is a heart that clenches before a sunset, a hand that trembles when touching the one it loves, a poet who weeps when finding the right word, I will be there. That night, Tlachtl dies with a sigh that sounds like a complete verse. Beneath his body, a new flower is born, petals red as the heart, center golden as the sun, leaves shaped like closed eyes. The Spanish call it a wildflower. The elders whisper, Xōchipilli Tonatiuh, Prince of Flowers, still dancing. And now, centuries later, in cities of concrete and electric light, young people with tired eyes search for something nameless, in forests, in notebooks, in encounters that seem like destiny. When the veil is torn, even for an instant, Xōchipilli sees them. Because he never left. He only waited. And now, he feels it's time to awaken again. Chapter 9, The Renaissance in the Concrete Streets. Smell the rain on hot asphalt, not the scent of sacred soil, but of what still breathes beneath the city. Hear the sound of a guitar played in a dark alley, where a young man sings verses he learned nowhere, but which spring forth as if already within him. See, in the hands of an anthropology student, an old Nahuatl manuscript reproduced in photocopy, with a note in the margin, Xōchipilli is not legend. It is frequency. The 21st century dawns. And, against all predictions of oblivion, the flower blooms again. In the mountains of Oaxaca, Mazatec healers lead vigils with Tenochtitlán, invoking spirits with ancient names, even under threat of imprisonment. In peripheral festivals, young people recite modern Xōchipilli about loneliness, identity, and resistance, unaware that they are echoing Tlaxcatl. In laboratories, scientists confirm what shamans have always known: psilocybin doesn't lead to chaos, but to reconnection. Xōchipilli observes everything, not as a distant god, but as a pulse in the veins of those who still dare to feel too much. In a Mexico City apartment, Aztec, a descendant of Nahua people, but raised among smartphones and screens, dreams of a garden where flowers sing in an ancestral language. He wakes with a verse on his lips: not all flowers are born on earth. Some are born in the chest of those who refuse to harden. Upon finding the manuscript and reading about Xōchipilli, he feels, for the first time, that his sensitivity is not weakness, but heritage. At a gathering of urban shamans, he tries peyotl, the sacred tobacco, not out of curiosity, but out of a thirst for truth. In his trance, he sees Xōchipilli, not as a museum idol, but as a living presence, vibrating in the light between the leaves, in the spaces between the notes of a song, in the silence after a true kiss. "You called me," says the god, without words. "I needed to know if you still existed," replies Aztec, weeping. "To exist is not the same as to be remembered. But now, you remind me. And that is enough." Xōchipilli asks for neither temples nor conversions, only openness. Create. Love. See. Even when the world says it's nonsense. Because the world that hardens the heart is the same one that destroys rivers, flowers, dreams. Aztec returns to the city and begins to write, to paint walls with psychoactive flowers, to organize listening circles where one speaks not to impress, but to feel together. The authorities call him a dangerous romantic, the skeptics, deluded. But those with broken hearts, those who weep when they hear certain songs, those who feel the world as both weight and poetry, come. Because Xōchipilli did not return to rule. He returned to remember. And soon, he will fulfill his deepest destiny, not as a god of the past, but as a seed of the future, blooming where it is least expected, but where it is most needed. Chapter 10, The Prince Who Lives in Every Open Flower. Feel the warmth of the morning sun touching your skin, not as its owner, but as a guest. Hear the first verse of a song you haven't yet written, but which already dwells in your heart. See, on the edge of the window, a common flower, perhaps a geranium, perhaps a daisy, and suddenly realize that it sees you back. It is in that instant that Xōchipilli is present. Because he was never just a god of the ancients. He is the force that inhabits every authentic encounter, every creation born of the soul, every moment when beauty leaves us defenseless. In the Nahuatl traditions, transmitted orally for centuries, hidden in the songs of grandparents, resurrected in the veins of the young, Xōchipilli does not demand stone temples. He demands open hearts. His destiny is not to be worshipped, but to be felt. It's not about being named, but about being recognized, in the silence after a poem, in the goosebumps before a melody, in the gaze that meets another's without the need for words. It wasn't destroyed by the cross, erased by time, nor domesticated by science. Because creative ecstasy doesn't belong to any era, it belongs to all who dare to see beyond the surface. Today, in a world of screens, algorithms, and haste, Xōchipilli returns, not with miracles, but with an invitation: stop. Breathe. Touch the earth. Create something simply because it is beautiful. Love someone simply because they exist. Let yourself be touched by the inexplicable. In the words of the ancient sages, he who does not weep before beauty has not yet seen the true face of the world. And Xōchipilli? He dances. He always dances, at urban crossroads, in forgotten forests, in the dreams of those who refuse to harden. His throne is not of gold, it is of fleeting petals. His power is not of dominion, it is of revelation. And his legacy is not one of doctrine, it is one of presence. Tlaxcatl has died. Aztec will grow old. But the song continues. Because as long as there is someone who, upon seeing the sunset, whispers, "This is too much to contain," Xōchipilli will be there, smiling silently. This story comes from the Nahuatl tradition, preserved in flowery songs, Xōchipilli, in colonial codices like the Florentine Codex, and in the living wisdom of the indigenous peoples of central Mexico. If it touched you, comment, what flower would you plant before the altar of your heart today?